everybody, it's a board game blogger. Today I'm here to review God's Playground by Martin Wallace. It's sort of a cynically named game about Poland in the 1400s through the 1700s. It's a three-player game only, which is sort of unique. And you play as one of the noble families in Poland during this time period. Now this is sort of a real unique game. I don't think I've played any game quite like it. It's really a Euro-American style hybrid game. There's a lot of thematic elements into it. There's a few sort of unique special rules, yet you sort of build the economy like you would in a Euro, and there's a lot of Euro style things, yet you still have this combat and dice rolling like you'd have in an American style game combined with the thematic elements. So it's a fairly unique game. I think it's great, and it's a game, however, that plays very differently depending the group you have in it. Since what's unique about this game is each player plays a noble family, and there's always these sort of outside opposing forces trying to invade Poland. And so the way that the three players can work together just depends how cooperative they are, can result in a very different style game. This is a game that could have a lot of backstabbing in it. So if you don't want to play a game where people can sort of, just betray you, you might want to stay away from this game. But there's a lot of negotiation involved, a lot of player interaction, depending on, okay, we need to repulse one particular type of invader. And it's a really unique game, and I don't think I've played another game that's similar to it at all. It's very neat in that it's a sort of a marrow hybrid style, and it's sort of a semi-cooperative game where you don't necessarily have to work together, but you really should in order to pulse the invaders. That you're still trying to ensure that you come out on top amongst the different royal families. Now the rule book is pretty good. I mean, it's much better than the old Martin Wallace game. Here's the rule book for Way Out West, and it was just black and white, no diagrams at all. And Martin Wallace has definitely made a good improvement here with the rule book. It's in color. There's a sort of a player aid sheet at the back. I really wish, however, this game came with two other player aid sheets. Sometimes, if we don't play this game, the group I'm with, for maybe 2 or 3 weeks, and we get back into it, there's a lot of sort of semi-unique rules in the game that each player kind of needs their own player sheet, and I wish it came with a player aid sheet for everyone. The rule book has the rules laid out, but sometimes it's tough to find a rule. There's no index, really, for the game. I mean, there's basic phase index, but if there's no glossary. I'm trying to find some term. I remember I need to access it. So it's a tough rule book compared to some of the other rule books out there. There's no sample play, which again, that's what I really love. I know some of these smaller publishers, Treefrog is a smaller publisher. They might not be able to afford to put that in each game, but I'd love it if they'd put it up on their website. Just a sample turn. It'd be so much more helpful for learning the game. The first couple of times I played this game, we always had a rule or two wrong. And there's some aspects of the game that just aren't clear in the rule book. Like, is money limited or unlimited? If we run out of the hard limit, do we run out of money? The rule book doesn't address these kind of things. I ended up, sort of messaging Martin Wallace. He gave an answer very quickly, that money is in fact hard limited. And so it's just little small things like that I wish would have been addressed in the rule book. But it's really a fantastic game. There's not another game like this that sort of just really seamlessly blends American and Euro style of play. It's going to be different each time. It's going to vary a lot depending on how your group plays. If they're just a very cooperative group that doesn't like to break agreements ever, you're going to get a very different game than if you're in a group that will break agreements, that will, just sort of selfishly backstab. But that might not work out so well for them in the end. So it's a really neat game. The components are generally pretty good. I got a few misprinted components but I think you're going to have that in a lot of games. But you know, it's quality wood components, and it's a great game. Why don't we take a look at how it plays and dive right in. On setup. If we zoom in here, this is sort of the turn marker. There's 4 turns in the game, and it shows sort of who was the major king in each area and sort of what military units the king's army starts with for each turn. We have sort of a victory point chart here, and we have sort of a quick summary player aid here, where it describes the turn sequence. If we zoom up here, we start with income, move down to place noble blocks, Polish army, events, the elections, claim land, special actions, then we buy armies, we campaign, enemies attack, Poland fights back, the enemies expand, we go to estates, victory points, and we end the turn. And then rinse and repeat 4 different times. We have sort of on the board quick description of the special actions, but it doesn't go into too much detail, but it's there, easy to see. We have how combat works, how much it costs to purchase a unit, what dice roll the combat unit hits on, how it's modified. So that's nice that it's sort of all right there on the board. And sort of this is the main board. And Poland is divided into 5 different provinces, and so this would be Lithuania. Currently we have 2 estates, the blue player and the red player, both with a point value of 3 at the end of the game, and production income of 3. Now at the end of the turn, if Lithuania wasn't invaded at all, it will go up 1 on the income chart, because you know it was able to prosper. If however units were able to come in and hurt it, it goes down 1. If however the enemy was, which is Russia here, was momentarily able to invade it, then there's no change at all. It just sort of stays at a flat of 3, not moving. And it now would sort of constantly change throughout the 4 turns of the game. So there's different enemies depending on the province it's bordering. You've got sort of the northern neighbor, which starts out as Teutonic Knights, switches to Sweden, then eventually Prussia, sort of to represent the time change. Lithuania is invaded by Russia. Ukraine is invaded by the Tartars. Little Poland by the Ottomans, and then Greater Poland, which is unique in that it's invaded by the Habsburgs, which the Habsburgs don't physically invade in the first 3 turns, but merely try and meddle in Polish affairs diplomatically. So that's sort of unique aspect to the game. So it's a well laid out board. I think it looks great. You know, it's fairly intuitive. You know, once you've learnt the rules, the board helps and aids in understanding how to play, and that sort of increases the flow of play. I don't know if I mentioned it before, but the game takes about 3 to 3.5 hours once you know and understand how to play. So this first turn, what would happen is everyone starts with 10 income, and then they would collect their income. So additionally, just to start off the turn. So currently everyone has 3 estates, all with income value 3, so they would get 9. However, there's a minimum income that you can get of 10, so everyone gets an additional 10 to have 20 income. Now what would happen would be the place nobles phase. So what you do is each player has 12 noble blacks, and 2 zeros, 2 1s, 2 2s, 2 3s, 2 4s, and 2 5s. And you would grab them And here, you can see this is a misprint here, because they're supposed to be just clear on the back and then have a number. This one is 4 on one side and it's 5 on the other. This 4 is supposed to be blank. You know, I should probably just file it off or something, because it's clearly giving away what I'm placing underneath. But that would be the one misprint I was talking about throughout the game. So what happens now is each player will decide where they want to put the nobles. They have 6 blocks to use, 1 for each of the provinces, and then another to be their contribution to the Polish army. So I will put down blocks, and here, you know, you could use 2 5s, 2 4s, and 2 3s, and then on the next turn use your lower numbers, or however you want to mix it up. And also the white player as well as the blue player would be doing this. So once those players have done that, I'll just grab some random blocks just to demonstrate how it would occur. And so this is important because this is the nobles each family would have in a particular province. And the noble strength is extremely important for doing all the other activities within the game. So now we would flip over and reveal the noble strength in each province. And I'll go ahead and I will put down the various cube strengths, and then we'll just continue from there. Okay, I've now put on the various nobles onto the board. And so now we elect the king. And to do that, we see who has contributed the most to the king's army box. So here we see that blue has contributed the most with 5. They get the ear of the king, and this is important for later on in the game. And the total amount contributed to, which is 9, is how much we increase the Polish army size. We see there's already 2 infantry and 2 cavalry. That is because of the current king in place and just the default for the turn. So we check the Polish army size box, and we see they get, for the 9 contributed, they get an additional 2 infantry and a cavalry. If this was any other turn but the first, they would also get an additional cannon, but because it's early on in the game and artillery wasn't used that often, the Polish army will not get a bonus of that. So now we've set up the Polish army. We now do events. We're going to see which of the various potential invaders gets additional support for the turn. So we will roll our 4 dice. We've got 2 2s, a 1, and a 5. So that means that the 1, which is the Teutonic Knights, would get an additional support. Russia would get 2 additional support, and the Habsburgs would get an additional support. We now move on to the election phase. So we go through the various provinces and elect someone to the Polish Parliament. So here, red has the most in Prussia, so they lose 1 noble cube and become the Prussian vote in Parliament. Here again, red has the most, so they will lose 1 and get a vote in Parliament. Here in the Ukraine, red also has 1. We see here in Little Poland, they also have 1. And in Great Poland, it is white with 1. So this is the makeup of Parliament. Now this is pretty important because blue has been locked out of Parliament. So for one of their potential options is they could basically remove a cube from anywhere and just shut down Parliament completely. And red would lose all 4 of those Parliament supports, which can be used for other actions later on in the game. So it's a unique situation that it's currently in at the moment. So next we move on to claiming the lands. Because blue has the ear of the king, they go first. They can remove 1 noble from any area and build an estate on that land. So here blue will go like this, then it goes clockwise from there. So red will choose to do one, and then white will choose to put one in a different location. So now, if any, going back to blue, they could choose to remove 2 noble cubes to build another estate. Now estates, at the end of the game will score points and are used for income production throughout the game. So they're pretty important. However, after that first estate built each turn, it becomes progressively more expensive. Always 2 nobles to build an estate. So I'm not sure if anyone wants to do anything at the moment. So let's assume no one else decides to build another estate. We then move on to the first special action. So blue, which goes first, here they could definitely choose to veto Parliament, or they could place land managers. They could trade with Danzig, which is to remove 1 of their noble cubes, and they get money equal to twice the estate value for Prussia. You can move cubes between provinces. You can do diplomacy, which is to attempt to make peace with a certain potential invader. You can never make peace, however, with the Habsburgs until the 4th turn, and you can never make peace with the Ottomans, since they're sort of, Muslim infidels fighting Christians. They would never want to make peace. So here, since blue goes first, diplomacy can only be done and attempted 1 time. It's definitely worth trying for blue to make peace with the Russians, as they have 2. Okay, so now blue wants to, make peace with Russia because they're the biggest threat. However, in order to make peace, you have to use one of your parliamentary cubes, of which blue has no parliament, pieces available. So they cannot possibly make peace. So what they will try to do is, it's a big decision for blue, whether or not they want to just, shut down Parliament, make everyone lose all of their Parliament pieces, or if, blue's feeling like being nice, do a different special action. So here, blue will decide to put a land manager down here and remove 1 of their cubes. It's now Russia's turn. Russia will try and make peace here because they have a 2 estates there, and the most valuable estate, that it's worth it to try and make peace. They will remove 1 Parliament piece, 1 noble, and roll a d6. Here they got a 2, so it's 2 plus an additional 2 to actually enforce the peace treaty, and it cost them $4. Now, whether or not the peace treaty with Russia will actually hold, we won't know until later on in the game when the enemies attack. Therefore, dice will be rolled. If 2 2s come up, 2 being the number for Russia, then Russia will in fact invade Lithuania. So, there's a possibility Russia will break the peace treaty, but it's a low possibility. We then continue to go through. White will get to do one of their special actions. There's a lot of special actions currently that aren't able to be used, such as Confederation, Jesuit schools, the new city. These are special actions that cannot be used on the very first turn. So it's kind of limited in what special actions they want. White will put a land manager here in Prussia. And now everyone does a second special action. So blue, seeing that there's now a peace treaty in Lithuania, will choose to put on another land manager. Land managers increasing the income value. Red will decide to move 2 of their cubes out of the Ukraine into Little Poland. Now this is a lot of cubes there, even though they don't have any estates, so I'm not sure what they're doing. We'll wait and find out. Now, white, with the final action, will move 2 cubes out of Greater Poland, seeing that the Habsburgs will invade and there's no defense for it, and will simply take out noble influence. So it's better to get them out while the going is good. So that was everyone's special action. Now we buy armies. And in order to buy armies, it costs a noble cube for where they're being placed and some additional money. Okay, so blue player decides to spend his $20, taking out 1 cube here in the Ukraine and placing 4 men, 2 cavalry, and purchasing the Cossacks for his total 20. The red player, having already spent 4 of his $20 on securing the peace treaty with Russia, will choose to put the rest here in Prussia. So for 16 can put down 3 cavalry and 2 infantry. Now the white player cannot put any units here in Little Poland, his most important location, because of the lack of noble cubes. And since the only other place he has an estate is Prussia, and he thinks that's well taken care of, decides to keep his entire $20. That can be used and converted into victory points at the end of the turn. 1 victory point for each $5. So that would be worth 4 victory points at the end of the turn. So that's what the different players decide to do. First, there is a campaign phase. And what players can do now is choose to attack the various areas first to try and knock them out of war, launch a sort of preemptive strike. If they want, they can also use the king's army to do so by removing a parliament cube in addition to the noble cube. So what will happen first here is blue will launch their first attack. So they will try to attack the Tartars. They will remove their last remaining noble cube and then attack the Tartars. So they roll first 2 for the Cossacks, a 3 and a 1. The 1 means that the unit is killed. We now roll 2 for his 2 cavalry, a 3 and a 5. The 5 is 1 hit. We now roll for the 4 infantry, and we got 2 4s and a 5. So and a 2. So unfortunately, only 1 more cube goes in. So because there's 2 blue cubes, 2 Polish cubes in where the 5 are for the Tartars will only invade with 3 units. That being the difference between them. It is now red's turn. They will try to attack against the Teutonic Knights, who, in addition to their normal 5, have an additional 1 cube that occurred in the events phase. So they are attacking, and they will also use one of their parliament tree cubes when they do the attack. So both they and the king's army will attack. They'll roll for themselves first. Roll 2 for their 2 infantry. A 1 and a 4, so one of their infantry dies. And they now roll 3 for the cavalry. One of their cavalry dies, however, they have 1 cavalry hit. Now the king's army attacks. They have 3 cavalry, and that is 1 hit with the cavalry. And now we see we put in a king's cube. Now this is important because whoever has the most cubes in at the end of the turn scores the victory points. If it's a tie between one player and another player, they split the points, same with for the king. Since this is worth 4 victory points, here the red player would only get 2 of those victory points. However, the king now attacks with all 4 the king's infantry. We have 2 deaths, so now 2 of the king's infantry are dead and cannot be used for further battles. However, they do have another hit. It's a total now of 3 Polish cubes in against the Teutonic Knights. 3 to the 6 means, again, only 3 will invade. It now goes to white. White has no units to use. However, they can choose to attack using their parliamentary cube on a campaign. However, they're going to skip that. Blue cannot attack since they have no noble cubes left in the Ukraine to launch another attack and no combat units elsewhere. However, now red will choose to attack once again, and they will also use the king's army, taking some support from Parliament. They roll 2 for their cavalry, 6 and a 2, which means another hit, and now they roll 1 for the infantry, a 5 is another hit, and now the king goes, 3 for the king's cavalry. We have 1 5 and 2 2, so 1 hit for the king, and finally the king's infantry attacks. 6 and a 4, so 1 hit for the king. Now if we look at the total number of cubes in here, the king has 4 and red has 3. So that's 7 to the total 6 for the Teutonic Knights. So the Teutonic Knights will not even attempt to invade on their turn should that hold. White passes, blue passes, and red passes again. So that is finished for the campaign phase. We now roll 4 dice for the enemy's attacks phase. Uh-oh, this is not good. We've now rolled 2 2s, which means the Russians will break their treaty and gain 2 additional support. So the treaty with Russia is broken. They get 2 additional support. The Tartars get 1 more support, as well as the Ottomans. And now we move on to the actual attacks. Okay, so now we have the enemies invade. Since there's more Polish cubes than enemy support from the Teutonic Knights will not invade. We now go over to Russia. It's very devastating that the peace treaty was broken, because now 7 Russian cubes will move in to Lithuania. And since there's no combat units there to defend, they all simply move in. We now move to the Ukraine. Now, there's 6 Tartars less 2 Polish cubes, so 4 Tartars will attempt to invade. However, because there are Polish army pieces there, they will attempt to fight back against them. So 4 potentially enter, but we will see if they in fact do or not. Firstly, the 4 infantry there will attempt to stop them. We've got 2 hits with the infantry, so 2 of the cubes are defeated of the Tartar cubes, and now we go with the 2 for the cavalry. 2 5s, so both the Tartar cubes are hit and annihilated, and nothing, in fact, invades the Ukraine. They were defeated at the border. We now move to the Ottomans, who 5 Ottomans move in, 1 plus the 4 default strength. They will all go in, and then we have the Habsburgs move in, and they will move in with 3. And here, as you see, it's just political influence and not, in fact, military units. So now we have the Poland Fights Back section, in which the king gets to fight back against the various units. So the person with the ear of the king, which was the blue player, gets 1 free attack. So they will choose to freely attack Russia here, because they're the ones that they could, get hurt by a lot. So they will freely attack with the king's army, which is over here, which is of the living, what's remaining, 3 cavalry and 2 infantry. So they will do 3 cavalry, which results in 2 hits. Thus 2 Tartar cubes are hit. They now do 2 infantry. And 1 infantry dies, and 1 hit. Okay, it now goes to red. They can use their parliament to attempt to attack, which they will do. They will use their final vote in parliament and use the king's army to attack here. They have 3 for the cavalry. Nothing hits, and 1 for the infantry. And the infantry is able to successfully hit. Now, with the final move, white will try to knock the Ottomans out of Little Poland. They have 3 dice for the cavalry, and 2 hits with them on the Ottomans, and finally the 1 remaining infantry. 5 is a hit. So you can see just how having the Polish army taking a heavy beating throughout the game can definitely affect the ability to repulse invaders after the fact. So that's it for Poland Fights Back. We're now on to the Enemies Expands phase. Okay, so we do Enemies Expand. We know that there are no enemies in Prussia to potentially expand. We now move over here to Lithuania. Now, while there are 3 Russian cubes currently in Lithuania, there's more noble cubes, so there cannot be any expansion. There are no cubes in the Ukraine. While there are 2 Ottoman cubes in Little Poland, there are still more Polish noble cubes, so they don't expand. And in Greater Poland, there's no expansion. So we now have done the Enemies Expand phase. We now move to the destruction of estates. So what would happen would be the difference between the number of enemy strength markers in a region less the number of noble cubes equals the destruction. So if there's 5 noble cubes and 7 enemy strength cubes, then 2 get destroyed. However, there's a minimum of 1. So no estates are destroyed in Prussia. However, in Lithuania, the topmost estate here, Reds, this case, is destroyed because there is some Russian influence in the area. The Ukraine, nothing is destroyed. In Poland, this topmost white is destroyed. And in Poland, which is sort of a unique beast unto itself, nothing is destroyed. However, the Habsburg influence take out and negate the noble cubes one for one, starting with the first player, which is the person with the ear of the king. So they would lose one, then white would lose one, and then it would be back to blue again. And that's how it would end. So now we adjust the estate value. Since Prussia was never invaded, the value of these estates goes up. Lithuania, since it was invaded with enemy strength remaining, then it gets reduced in value. The Ukraine was never successfully invaded. Remember, they beat off that initial invasion right away, so they go up. Poland goes down, and Greater Poland does not switch because they had the Habsburgs go in, but they were all removed at the end. So there's no switch there. We now score up the victory points. So red here has split. Well, they haven't even split. They have less cubes in than the king, so they score no victory points. Blue has the most cubes in the Tartar box, so they will get 3 victory points. And white, having not spent any of their money at all, scores 4 victory points. So that's sort of how it looks at the end of the turn. What happens is we now clean up the board, all of the combat units get removed, all the cubes in the enemy boxes are removed, and we sort of start the turn over. So I really enjoy this game. There's going to be a lot of negotiation between the players of where are you going to fight at? Okay, will you purchase units to protect Little Poland? We both have estates there. Where are you placing estates? There's a lot of negotiation. I mean, there's a fair amount of luck in this game just because of the fighting, which I think, means you can't solve the game, and it adds a lot of tension to the game. It's a very unique, fun game. Goes over 4 turns. At the final end of the game, let's assume it's the final turn. So in addition to the points scored, we would also score up for the estates. So here for Lithuania, blue would score 6 victory points and red would score 3 victory points, would be how that works. So there's sort of a final scoring at the end of the game, but you're also scoring throughout, which is a neat mechanic. You can't sort of ignore the game and just try and win at the end, nor can you really win if you're doing very good at the beginning of the game, but leave nothing for the end game. So it's kind of neat that you have to be making progress throughout the game, but also end the game strong. So it's a neat mechanic in that sense. There's different special actions that play out well. I think this is a really neat game. It's very unique. There's nothing quite like it. And it's going to play very differently, just depend on how much you're able to cooperate with your opponents. And again, sort of the luck of the dice. So in my opinion, it's a fantastic game. If you like Euros or if you like American-style games, it's a really great game. I think you'd only avoid it if you're allergic to dice, or you don't like negotiations, or you don't like games where you could, in fact, get backstabbed. However, I think there's just some neat elements. It sort of simulates the pressure that Poland was in throughout this time period, always being invaded and attacked by different players. There's also some unique rules sort of on the third turn where the Ottomans sort of invade the Habsburgs and you have to sort of ride to save Vienna. And so there's some neat mechanics there. But if you can sort of see the interplay between the nobles building up the estates to generate income, having support in parliament to use the king's army, there's just a lot of neat mechanics that interweave very well to make a very fun game. Again, however, because there's all these unique rules, sometimes it, you know, if it's been a couple of weeks since you last played it, it's tough to remember everything. That's why I think these player aid sheets, you know, I really wish there'd been 3 of these in the game, not just the one. Other than that, though, it's a fantastic game. Can't recommend it enough. You know, I really seem to like a lot of Martin Wallace's games, and this one, it's fantastic and very unique. Till next time, I'm the Board Game Blogger.